If you are a therapist in private practice and you have ever had the thought, maybe I should open a group private practice, this video is for you because I am going to go over all of the reasons why I decided not to open a group practice, and a few of them are a little bit controversial, especially the last one, so stick around to the end and let's get into it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelley Stevens. I teach therapists how to build six-figure private practices, and I teach you how to do that without opening a group practice. So in order to figure out why I decided not to open a group practice, I first have to tell you about what my experience was working in a group private practice as a pre-licensed therapist and as a licensed therapist. I worked in a group private practice for 5 years before I went out on my own. And to be honest with you, it was an incredibly positive experience. I had really wonderful bosses. I got great supervision. I got paid well. And overall, I felt a sense of community. I felt a sense of belonging. I had a lot of clinical support and help. So when I decided to leave that group practice and open my own, I had in the back of my mind that maybe one day I would open my own group practice. So when I set out on my own to open my own practice, making a long story short, I hit 6 figures really fast. I had an overflow of clients, and it felt like kind of this perfect time to maybe take on an associate or take on another therapist and start opening a group. So I sat down and I really thought to myself, why am I opening this group practice? And when I got honest with myself, I think I answered the question in the same way that a lot of the therapists that I work with now answer it. And I said, I want to be earning more money outside of my own personal time, and opening a group private practice feels like a good way to do that. Then once I had that in mind, that my goal really was to earn more money in less of my own personal time, I decided, you know what, I need to look at the model of group private practice and really figure out whether or not that's actually going to be the case. And when I looked at the group practice that I had been a part of, a few things stood out to me. I had really wonderful bosses. However, they gave a ton of their personal time and personal energy unpaid to making sure that the group was functioning really well. So when the lights went off, when a receptionist needed help with something, when a therapist was having a clinical emergency, when an office needed new furniture, when the bills had to be paid and the taxes had to be paid and payroll had to be run, they were the ones who were doing it. And as I looked at the owners of the group, I started to notice that in the group I was working in, my bosses actually didn't seem to be working any less, even though they were seeing less clients. So what I decided to do was go out and talk to other group practice owners, not just the ones that I had worked for, and kind of see. And one thing that I really noticed is that the group practice owners that I admired were giving just as much time to their associates and to the people that work for them, whether they were licensed or not, as they would be if they were just managing their own cases. And so although I might make more money, and that's questionable, I'm not actually going to be getting more time back. So the first reason that I decided not to open a group practice is after doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of therapists, and take into account I have a big network of therapists, so I talked to a lot of people. Most of them said, no, I still invest a lot of time here. Now, the exception to this was some colleagues who were willing to have very strong boundaries around when they were available to their staff. And I just knew from being a therapist in someone else's practice and how many situations came up that I didn't necessarily want to be somebody that my staff felt like they couldn't come to, because in the end, the liability was on me, so that wasn't going to work for me. The second reason that I decided not to open a group practice is I couldn't really make the math work financially. And let me explain why. What I noticed for many of the practices that I had in my community, so either they had associates and they weren't paying them a lot, and they were charging a high fee, but that associate typically only stayed 1 to 2 years, and there was kind of a setup time where they had to start training them, fill their caseload. So maybe they were getting about a year to a year and a half of that associate having a full caseload and doing well clinically on their own. Or Or some practices had licensed therapists, and maybe those licensed therapists were a little more autonomous. However, they weren't able to have a split that was making it super profitable for them. And one thing I started to notice was just the high rate of turnover in group practices. For me, as a private practice business coach, I like to empower therapists to go out and start businesses, right? I'm going to be the type of person that teaches people how to market themselves, that lets them get out there on their own and try something. And so I knew for myself that I would likely hire somebody who was pretty entrepreneurial. And then because I care about them, I would teach them how to build a practice and then they would leave. Because I knew that my goal really was to empower other therapists, I started to think to myself, like, this is not a good business model for me because I'm just going to teach people how to leave. So that was the second reason why I couldn't make the math work in terms of the billing. I couldn't really figure out how I could make people stay because inevitably I wanted them to be able to leave and go on their own. And so it just didn't make sense for that reason as well. Here's the third and last reason that I decided not to open a group practice. And this is the one that's a little controversial. So I simply did not want to give more emotional bandwidth and time outside of my family and my clients. And here's what I mean by this. If you know me, you know I run a big social media platform. I run courses and workshops and all sorts of things. However, I'm really protective of my clients, my caseload, and my time with my family. And what I knew about being a really great group practice owner is that you have to give of yourself and provide mentorship. And any group practice owner that tells you they don't mentor the people that work for them or they don't invest in them and throw holiday parties and other sorts of things is probably not the group practice owner you want to be working for. You want a group practice owner that invests in you. And when I thought to myself about the fact that many group practice owners go into it to make passive income, I realized it really was not going to be passive at all. And I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to invest in other people in that way when I could be investing in other alternative income sources. So providing trainings, providing webinars, maybe providing supervision just by the hour, right? Teaching at the graduate level, opening a social media platform. I realized that there were less emotionally complex ways to make passive, what I like to call leveraged income outside of group practice. And so I said, no, I'm not going to do it. Doesn't mean I will never do it, but at this phase of my life, I just can't make it make sense. However, I'm willing to bet that there are people watching this video who can, who are going to tell me, Kelley, I love group practice and I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you love about it. I'd love to hear. Make sure to like and subscribe and let me know if you want to see more video content on group private practice, because I have a couple great friends who run great group practice courses and programs. I'll link them here. Maybe we'll bring one on as a guest. I'll see you next time.